Hello there, and welcome. You found your way to Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner of the internet where the past moves slowly, softly, and gently enough to help you drift toward rest. If you're here for boring history for sleep, falling asleep to boring history, calm bedtime, storytelling, soft-spoken history documentary narration, relaxing history to fall asleep to, or simply a soothing history sleep story, then you're in the right place. Tonight, we'll be exploring the strange night rituals of ancient Egyptian royalty, a topic as old as the desert sands and as mysterious as the temples carved into stone. Nothing hurried, nothing startling, just a slow wandering through forgotten routines, quiet palaces, and ancient beliefs that shaped how kings and queens once prepared for sleep. As you settle in, maybe you're lying in bed, or listening with headphones, or simply trying to unwind after a long day. Allow your breathing to become slow and steady like the predictable rhythm of the Nile's eternal flow. If this kind of storytelling brings you peace, if it helps your mind rest, or guides you towards sleep, you are welcome to like this video, share it with someone who might need rest, and subscribe, but only if it truly feels right. Not out of pressure, only if it gently supports the calm you're seeking. And if you'd like to, feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to imagine people all around the world, fans of Roman history, archaeology enthusiasts, or simply tired souls, slowly drifting towards sleep while listening to the same soft voice, the same quiet story. So, if you haven't already, dim the lights. Let your body sink into wherever you are resting. Let your thoughts soften the way papyrus leaves bend in the breeze. The past awaits, patient, distant, and gentle. The temples grow quieter. The desert cools beneath a star-heavy sky. And the rituals of forgotten royalty begin to whisper through time. Let us step softly into the hush of ancient Egypt's nighttime world. And begin. Imagine yourself in the heart of ancient Egypt, in a time long before clocks, electricity, or rushing schedules. The day is slowly giving way to night, and with it, the rhythm of the kingdom begins to shift. The sun, which the Egyptians believed was a divine being traveling across the sky, has lowered toward the horizon in a final warm glow. Its descent casts long shadows over the Nile and turns the limestone temples a muted shade of rose. The world becomes softer, slower, quieter. For the ordinary people, daily work winds down. Fields near the river have already been tended, baskets of grain have been carried, and animals, goats, cattle, and donkeys, are now settled or tied near shelter enclosures. But tonight, our attention moves not to the workers or the bustling town dwellers. Instead, we move closer to the seat of power, the royal residence. Evening in the palace unfolds gently. The walls are high, elegant, and decorated with painted lotus flowers and symbols of gods who watch over the royal household. Lanterns made from clay and bronze begin to glow, lit by soft, flickering oil flames. Their light dances on the polished floors and reflects off alabaster vessels used earlier in the day. The air is warm, yet beginning to cool, a nightly relief after the burning desert heat. The palace itself is not chaotic despite its size. Instead, there is a measured hush to everything. Servants walk with deliberate calm steps, careful not to disturb the atmosphere. Their linen garments rustle softly, and their sandals barely touch the smooth stones beneath them. They move with quiet purpose. Some carry folded fabrics woven carefully from flax, while others prepare scented oils or bring small dishes filled with fruits, nuts, or honeyed bread. As the sky darkens completely, stars begin to emerge, bright and steady, like ancient jewels set against the deep blue velvet of night. To the ancient Egyptians, these stars were not merely distant lights. They were celestial beings, symbols of eternity, reminders of kings who had lived, ruled, and passed into the afterlife. Within the palace, music sometimes fills the evening air, not lively or energetic, but gentle, steady, and soothing. Perhaps a harp or flute, just a few soft notes repeated slowly, like waves brushing the riverbank. The sound is comforting, familiar, and respectfully subdued. It acts as a bridge between the demands of the day and the quiet mysteries of the night. The Pharaoh, considered the living embodiment of Horus, moves through this evening ritual with purpose. He is both ruler and symbol. His presence shapes the tone of the palace. Those who serve him know the importance of balance and ritual, nothing rushed, nothing careless. Every action is part of a larger cycle, reflecting beliefs that the universe depends on order, harmony, and consistency. Nearby, the royal gardens settle into silence. Papyrus reeds sway gently. Water lilies close their petals. The scent of warm earth mixes with faint floral perfume, creating an atmosphere that feels both ancient and timeless. A breeze slips through the tall date palms, moving slowly, as though reluctant to disturb the peace. Night in the palace marks a transition, not just from wakefulness to rest, but from the physical world to the spiritual one. Egyptians believed that sleep was not merely a pause, it was a journey. The world of dreams connected the mortal world to the divine realms of gods, ancestors, and spirits. Preparing for sleep, especially for a ruler, was symbolic and meaningful. It acknowledged vulnerability while honoring protection. The guards at the palace gates remain attentive, though even their stance reflects the calm of the evening. Their silhouettes stand firm against the moonlit courtyard, spears angled, eyes steady. The kingdom rests, but duty never entirely sleeps. Inside, the atmosphere continues to soften. Voices grow quieter. Torches glow steadier. The palace feels enclosed yet expansive, like a dream forming without urgency. As you breathe slowly with the rhythm of this ancient night, you may notice how predictable and comforting everything becomes. Each step, each movement, each moment unfolds with purpose and patience. Just as the Nile flows without hurry, time itself seems to stretch and slow, offering rest. The world outside fades further into darkness, and soon, the preparations for the royal night ritual will begin. But for now, we simply observe. We simply breathe. We simply rest in the quiet glow of a world long gone, yet strangely familiar. As the night deepens and the last colors of sunset fade completely from the sky, the preparations inside the royal residence continue with slow, steady intention. Nothing is rushed. Every gesture and every step feels as though it has been rehearsed for centuries, because in many ways, it has. The pharaoh does not prepare for sleep in the same way ordinary Egyptians do. While most people might settle onto simple woven mats or straw bedding, the royal sleeping chambers are far more elaborate. Yet, despite the wealth and luxury, the atmosphere is not extravagant in a loud or overwhelming way. Instead, it is quiet, symmetrical, and designed to reflect the Egyptian value of ma'at, balance, order, harmony. The chamber is large, yet strangely minimalistic. The bed itself rests on a raised platform crafted from wood, often decorated with carved lions or falcon motifs. The mattress is layered with carefully woven textiles, linen smooth enough to feel cool even in the warm night air. At the foot of the resting place, a pair of delicate sandals sits neatly aligned, placed deliberately, never casually discarded. Nearby, small alabaster jars sit on a low table. Some contain ointments made from crushed flowers, oils, and resins. Others hold mixtures considered protective, since believed to keep harmful spirits away while the sleeper is vulnerable. Among these, one particular fragrance is common: kifi, a blend of ingredients such as honey, wine, myrrh, cinnamon, raisins, and herbs. Its aroma is warm and soothing, filling the space with a scent both ancient and calming, like a gentle reminder that sleep was once a sacred experience. A servant approaches with quiet, practiced caution, carrying a vessel of warm water. The pharaoh washes slowly, face, arms, and hands, moving with deliberation. Water in Egyptian belief was not merely cleansing in a physical sense. It carried symbolic meaning, tied to rebirth, purity, and the eternal cycles of the Nile. The washing is not hurried, and the stillness of the chamber allows each movement to feel meaningful. Once the cleansing is complete, linen garments are adjusted. These are not the elaborate ceremonial robes seen in public processions or temple rituals, but lighter, softer clothing intended only for rest. Their texture is smooth and clean, woven with care by skilled hands. Nothing itchy, nothing heavy, nothing distracting. A priest, soft-spoken and discreet, enters the chamber. His presence is calm rather than imposing. The priest carries a small wooden box, plain in structure, yet treated with reverence. Inside are protective amulets. Some are shaped like Ankh symbols, representing life. Others resemble the Wedjat, the eye of Horus, believed to guard against harm and illness. These objects are touched lightly, blessed through quiet recitations. Words spoken so gently they seem meant only to exist for a moment before dissolving into the air. The pharaoh receives selected charms with quiet composure. Some may be placed beneath the pillow. Others rest upon the chest or are worn around the neck. Not because royalty fears sleep, but because sleep, to the ancient Egyptians, was a small symbolic version of death. A nightly passage through darkness. A temporary return to the realm of gods and ancestors. Beyond the chamber walls, the palace continues its descent into stillness. Torches flicker softly, casting long, fluid shadows on the painted surfaces. The flame does not crackle loudly, only whispers, gently shifting as if half asleep itself. In the distance, a faint sound of water trickling through a garden fountain echoes in the quiet, creating a rhythmic pattern. The breeze that moves through the high, latticed windows feels cool now, a relief after the heat of the day. The night air carries subtle scents. Sand cooled by darkness, dried reeds, faint jasmine from royal gardens, and the lingering warmth of smoked incense. The silence is deep, yet never empty. It feels full of presence, history, memory, belief. Time moves differently here. Slowly, softly, thoughtfully. The pharaoh takes a final slow breath before reclining onto the waiting bed. The linen surface accepts the weight evenly, and the room seems to acknowledge the transition, wakefulness giving way to rest. Outside, the constellations glide overhead in their ancient patterns. To the Egyptians, the stars were more than distant light. They were souls of pharaohs who had risen to the heavens long ago, watching over the living. The night sky becomes both guardian and guide. The palace does not celebrate this moment. It simply observes it. There is no applause, no ritual announcement. Only the gentle continuation of a routine practiced across generations. As the pharaoh settles deeper into rest, the world grows quieter still. Just breathing, just existing, just resting beneath the watchful, endless sky. Night has now fully settled over the palace, and with it comes an even deeper calm. The sounds of the evening soften until they blend into a nearly unbroken hush. The rhythm of life follows a predictable pattern, gradual, steady, familiar. Even the movement of the servants becomes slower, almost synchronized with the stillness of the room. The pharaoh's sleeping chamber grows dimmer as the oil lamps burn lower, their flames now thin and steady. The light is soft enough that the edges of the room blur slightly, turning the carved figures on the walls, falcons, gods, symbols of eternity, into gentle silhouettes. Nothing in the room demands attention. Everything exists quietly, simply as though waiting. In many ancient cultures, sleep was a natural act, but in ancient Egypt, it held layers of meaning. The pharaoh, as a divine ruler, was seen not only as a living representative of Horus, but also as a figure who mirrored the cycles of the gods. Just as the sun god Ra traveled across the sky by day and journeyed through the underworld at night, the pharaoh too symbolically crossed into another realm during sleep. The palace and those within it understood this responsibility and treated rest as something sacred. Sometimes, before sleep fully took hold, soft words were spoken, more ritual than conversation. These utterances were not dramatic invocations, but gentle protective phrases, often repeated from memory. They were expressions of continuity, a link between the resting body and the unseen forces believed to surround it. These words moved slowly, like a lullaby meant not to entertain, but to soothe. A gentle breeze moves the thin linen curtains, carrying in a faint fragrance from the gardens. The scent is subtle, lotus, perhaps, or night-blooming flowers cultivated specifically for royalty. The fragrance is part meditation, part comfort, something the pharaoh has smelled every night of life. Familiarity itself becomes a shield against the unknown. Somewhere in the distance, a quiet animal call echoes, maybe a night bird or a desert fox near the outer walls. Instead of disrupting the scene, the sound gently reminds those awake of the world beyond the palace. A world vast, dark, ancient, and always present. Inside, stillness deepens. Near the bed, a carved wooden stand holds scrolls made of papyrus. Some are texts describing the gods and the afterlife. The Book of Gates, the coffin texts, or hymns dedicated to protective deities. Others contain daily records, plans, or writings meant to ensure the ongoing order of the kingdom. These scrolls remain untouched tonight. They serve as quiet reminders that the pharaoh's responsibilities continue tomorrow. For now, rest is the only duty. The bed itself creaks softly as the pharaoh adjusts position, a minor sound, yet noticeable in the near silence. The motion is slow and intentional. Linen sheets brush gently against the skin, cool and smooth. The body begins to settle, muscles loosening, breath lengthening. Moments pass, though time feels slow, almost elongated. The quiet creates a sensation of suspended existence, between waking and dreaming, between the known and the symbolic. If one could listen closely, the only clear sound would be the steady rhythm of breathing. Everything else, the faint flicker of flames, the soft movements of air, the shifting textures of fabric, exists almost below awareness. For those still awake in the palace, guards, attendants, caretakers, alertness remains calm, not urgent. They keep watch not because danger is expected, but because the pharaoh's rest is part of the cosmic balance. Protection is a duty carried out with respect and quiet patience. As the pharaoh drifts closer to sleep, the borders of perception blur. Thoughts no longer form sharply. Instead, they soften, slow, and dissolve. The body feels heavier, and the bed seems to hold it with steady, patient support. And somewhere, deep within the quiet of the ancient night, dreams begin to form. Not the vivid, racing dreams of anxiety or uncertainty, but slow, symbolic visions shaped by belief and ritual. Images of gods, stars, calm waters, and eternal landscapes float into the mind, weightless and unhurried. The world outside continues onward, sand shifting softly in distant dunes, the river flowing in its ancient rhythm, and the night sky drifting overhead like an old guardian. But inside the chamber, everything is still. Everything is peaceful. Everything is resting. The pharaoh sleeps, not merely as a person exhausted by the day, but as someone fulfilling a role within the cosmic order. Sleep becomes part of existence, part of identity, part of the natural harmony believed to hold the universe together. And so, the first night ritual, simple, quiet, reverent, comes to rest. Now, let's shift our focus slightly from the rhythms of daily life to the life of one particular ruler whose nights, like those of other pharaohs, were filled with ritual and quiet purpose. Imagine yourself walking through the corridors of history to meet a king known not only for his governance, but for the subtle, deeply personal habits that shaped his life after the sun set. His name is Thutmose III, often remembered as a warrior and an architect of empire. Yet his private evenings were far removed from the thunder of battles or the clatter of administration. Here, in the muted hush of the palace, we glimpse the more intimate side of his existence. Thutmose III's mornings and afternoons were indeed filled with ceremony, strategy, and political decision-making. He inspected soldiers, received foreign emissaries, and oversaw the movement of wealth and grain. Yet, as dusk approached, he stepped into a very different rhythm. While the public saw the pharaoh as a commanding figure within the palace, his movements were measured, deliberate, and intimate, reflecting both the burdens of kingship and the human desire for calm. Evenings began with the careful removal of ceremonial garments. Layers of linen robes, each representing a specific function or role, were folded and stored with precision. These robes were heavy with embroidery, symbols of authority, and traces of ritual incense. To take them off was to symbolically lay down the mantle of office, if only temporarily. The transition from public figure to private individual was subtle but essential. After these garments were removed, Thutmose III would participate in a personal cleansing ritual. Water, drawn from the Nile or stored in alabaster vessels, was poured over hands, face, and arms. The motion was slow, meditative. The act itself symbolized purification, a gentle preparation for the night's journey into sleep. Perhaps it is easy to imagine the cool water running over skin, catching the soft glow of oil lamps, carrying the faint scent of herbs and flowers, a quiet sensory anchor amid the abstract weight of kingship. The pharaoh's chamber was designed to support not just comfort, but reflection and serenity. Small tables held containers of ointments and oils. These substances were used to soothe the skin, but they also carried symbolic meanings. Certain scents, like myrrh or cinnamon, were believed to calm the spirit. Others were protective, warding off unseen forces that might disturb rest. To an outside observer, the chamber may appear lavish, but nothing in it clamored for attention. The space was balanced, arranged, and intentionally quiet. As night fully embraced the palace, Thutmose III would sometimes sit quietly, gazing at scrolls or objects of personal significance. Perhaps he held a small statuette of a god, or perused a scroll containing hymns or verses designed to maintain cosmic harmony. These moments were private, almost reverent. They reinforced the idea that sleep was not a passive state, but a conscious participation in the cycles of life, death, and the eternal. Occasionally, attendants would enter the chamber to perform routine duties, adjusting linens, lighting lamps, or preparing the small altar that stood at the room's far corner. These movements were quiet, deliberate, and unobtrusive. The attendants themselves were trained not merely in service, but in the philosophy that the pharaoh's night was sacred. Every action, every gesture existed in harmony with the overarching calm of the evening. Interestingly, Thutmose III's nights also included elements of study and observation. While much of his reign is remembered for military campaigns, in private he was known to take time examining astronomical charts or recording observations. Stars were not merely beautiful. They were tools for understanding time, predicting seasonal changes, and reinforcing the alignment between human life and cosmic order. The pharaoh's attention to such details highlights the subtle, thoughtful nature of his private hours, a quiet dimension often overshadowed by public feats. During these hours, the palace itself seemed almost to breathe. The flicker of oil lamps mirrored the slow rhythm of the pharaoh's movements. Shadows stretched and receded, dancing across painted walls depicting gods, pharaohs, and scenes of eternity. The room was filled with texture, the smoothness of polished stone, the softness of linen, the faintly perfumed air, yet none of it demanded notice. Each element contributed to a sense of order, calm, and continuity. And as the night deepened, the pharaoh would settle into the raised bed, aligning pillows, smoothing sheets, adjusting the light of oil lamps to the softest glow possible. Small charms, amulets, or symbols of protection were positioned near the head or on the chest. Some were objects carried through generations, others newly consecrated by priests or attendants. In this quiet intimacy, we see the intersection of human need and spiritual belief, a moment in which a powerful ruler becomes, briefly, simply a person preparing to rest. Outside the chamber, the palace and city continued to sleep. The Nile moved steadily beneath the moonlight, Birds had gone silent, and the desert beyond shimmered faintly under stars. Yet within the walls of the palace, Thutmose III's night ritual carried on, slow, deliberate, meditative, and entirely separate from the clamor of daytime duties. These hours remind us that even those who shaped empires required the same quiet, restorative rest we all seek. As the quiet hours deepen, we can explore another facet of Thutmose III's nocturnal life, the ceremonial and spiritual practices that occupied the hours before true rest took hold. These were not mere routines, but carefully considered rituals that reflected both his position as pharaoh and the enduring beliefs of ancient Egypt. Imagine yourself once again stepping softly into the dimly lit halls of the royal palace, where every shadow seems to hold centuries of memory and every faint sound is part of a measured, deliberate rhythm. Before retiring fully to bed, the pharaoh often engaged in minor rituals to honor the gods and secure divine favor for the coming day. These were gentle acts, arranging small offerings of bread, honey, or wine on a low altar, touching amulets with precise motions, reciting softly verses meant to maintain harmony between the mortal and divine worlds. The words were spoken under breath, quiet enough that only those closest could hear them, yet steady enough to form a rhythm that echoed across the chamber like a soft, reassuring heartbeat. The altar itself was simple yet dignified. A polished wooden stand supported small bowls and vessels. Some contained scented oils, others held small fruits or cakes formed with care. Each item had symbolic value: honey for sweetness and life, wine for abundance, bread for sustenance. These offerings were part of a long-standing tradition in which the pharaoh participated daily, not out of obligation alone, but from a deep-seated understanding that the god's favor was maintained through ritual consistency. Attendants moved quietly during these moments, ever mindful of their presence. They adjusted the oil lamps, replenished incense, and ensured that nothing disrupted the measured calm of the chamber. Their movements were almost imperceptible, a choreography learned over years of service. Each gesture was small, intentional, and unhurried, mirroring the overarching philosophy of the pharaoh's nightly routine. One of the more intimate practices involved the pharaoh consulting symbols of protection before sleep. Small amulets, often shaped like the ankh, the scarab, or the eye of Horus, were placed near the head or chest. These objects were believed to guard not only the body, but also the spiritual essence during its nightly journey. In the soft glow of the lamps, these items cast delicate shadows across the linen sheets, subtle reminders of safety, continuity, and care. Occasionally, the pharaoh's attention turned outward to the night sky. Through latticed windows or open courtyards, he would observe the stars, noting the familiar constellations and the subtle shifts that marked the passage of time. The celestial bodies were more than decoration. They were markers, guides, and symbols of eternal cycles. To gaze upon them was to participate in a cosmic rhythm that mirrored the flow of life along the Nile. The palace itself seemed to respond to these rituals. The flickering lamplight softened the angles of the room. Shadows stretched and receded gently across carved walls, and the faint scent of incense mingled with the cool night air. Every element, from the textures of the fabrics to the placement of vessels on the altar, contributed to a subtle atmosphere of reassurance and quiet reflection. The pharaoh's personal attendants, trained not only in service but in the philosophy of rest, maintained a steady, unobtrusive presence. Their actions, tending lamps, adjusting pillows, or laying out protective objects, were precise yet gentle, ensuring that nothing startled or disturbed the calm. Even the softest sound, the brushing of linen, the faint movement of sandals on polished stone, was absorbed into the quiet rhythm of the palace night. These practices highlight an essential truth. In ancient Egypt, sleep was more than a physiological necessity. For the pharaoh, it was a symbolic act, a passage through which he maintained cosmic order and engaged with unseen forces. The rituals, scents, sounds, and subtle movements all reinforce the sense of balance that was at the heart of Egyptian life. As the night wears on, the pharaoh's breathing slows, and the rhythm of the palace itself seems to match this gentle cadence. Lamps burn lower, their flickering, barely stirring shadows on the walls. The chamber becomes increasingly still, and the interplay of light, scent, and quiet action encourages the body and mind toward deeper relaxation. Even in such a powerful position, the pharaoh's vulnerability during sleep is acknowledged, yet carefully managed through centuries-old practices. The simplicity of gestures, arranging amulets, reciting protective words, adjusting pillows, belies a profound understanding of the human need for calm and security. These acts, repeated nightly, form a quiet testament to the wisdom embedded in the routines of ancient rulers. Soon, the soft rhythm of the palace, combined with the measured rituals of the pharaoh, ushers the room into complete tranquility. The oil lamp's glow diminishes further, the scents linger faintly, and every movement has settled into a pattern of stillness. It is a deliberate, intentional preparation for sleep, steeped in history, belief, and quiet care. And so, the night continues, slow, steady, and carefully orchestrated, until the pharaoh finally reclines fully into rest, his body and spirit aligned with the rhythms of both the earthly and divine worlds. As the night reaches its quietest point, we can now observe the culmination of the pharaoh's nocturnal practices, the moment where ritual, reflection, and rest intersect seamlessly. Imagine yourself again stepping into the hushed palace, where shadows stretch like soft fabric across the stone floors, and the faint fragrance of incense lingers in the cool air. It is a world carefully balanced between the tangible and the symbolic, between human vulnerability and divine protection. By this time, the lamps are burning low, their golden glow spreading in gentle pools across the walls. Carved hieroglyphs and painted motifs, the falcon of Horus, the lotus, the ankh, become soft silhouettes, fading slowly into the darkness. The room feels expansive, yet intimate, designed to focus attention inward towards stillness, calm, and quiet thought. The pharaoh, now fully prepared for rest, moves deliberately, aware of every gesture, yet his movements are so practiced that they almost appear unconscious. Thutmose III would often spend these moments reviewing the small charms and protective symbols he kept near his bed. Each piece was positioned with care, whether an amulet placed over the heart, a small figurine of a god beside the pillow, or a scroll containing protective text tucked within reach. To the uninitiated, these objects might seem ornamental, but in the context of Egyptian belief, they served a crucial function. They were conduits of spiritual safety, reminders of cosmic order, and silent companions for the night. The final acts of the evening were subtle. The pharaoh adjusted his position on the raised bed, smoothing the linen sheets, feeling the soft textures beneath him. The room smelled faintly of kifi, a warm, comforting blend of honey, herbs, and resin, and the scent seemed to mingle with the cool night air drifting through the latticed windows. Every element was chosen to calm the senses, to reassure the body and spirit that the night was safe and that the world beyond the walls would continue in harmony. Outside, the palace is still. The Nile flows with a steady, gentle murmur, its surface catching the starlight in delicate ripples. Desert winds move softly through distant dunes, carrying a faint, dry scent that is both grounding and timeless. Even the animals, cats, dogs, and small birds, have settled. Life continues, but in a muted, unhurried rhythm. The pharaoh's breathing slows gradually, in sync with the serene rhythm of the palace. The attendants, long since withdrawn from direct view, continue to maintain vigilance in quiet, unobtrusive ways. Their presence is a reassurance, a subtle hum in the background, ensuring that rest is uninterrupted. They move so lightly that one might think they are part of the shadows themselves, weaving between lamp and wall, attending to their duties with minimal disturbance. As sleep finally approaches, the mind enters a liminal state. Thoughts lose their sharp edges, concerns dissolve into repetition and rhythm, and the pharaoh's consciousness drifts toward dream. Dreams in ancient Egyptian belief were more than mere mental wanderings. They were journeys into spiritual realms, opportunities for insight, guidance, and reflection. The patterns of stars, the whispers of gods, the subtle scents and sounds of the room, all these elements contribute to the transition from waking to dreaming. It is remarkable to consider that such a powerful figure, responsible for the lives of millions, participates nightly in a quiet, measured process designed to ensure balance, protection, and peace. In this moment, he is simply human, resting, breathing, and aligning with the natural and cosmic rhythms that govern life. The grandeur of empire, the strategies of war, and the duties of rule all recede, leaving only the quiet intimacy of the night. The palace itself seems to exhale, its walls absorbing the soft light, the scents, and the steady rhythm of calm. The elaborate bed, the carefully arranged amulets, the faint flicker of the last lamp, all exist in harmony with one another. The entire space becomes a sanctuary, designed not for spectacle, but for the quiet, restorative work of sleep. And so, as the pharaoh drifts fully into rest, the palace, the city, and the world outside move gently around him. The desert stretches under the endless sky. The Nile continues its patient flow, and the stars silently trace their ancient paths. Within the palace, history, belief, and ritual converge in a quiet celebration of stillness. Through this night, we witness not a tale of conquest or ceremony, but of daily life's intersection with ritual, the careful attention to comfort and protection, and the deliberate pacing that allowed even a ruler to enter the realm of dreams with serenity. The first portion of our journey into Egyptian night rituals concludes here, offering a gentle reflection on the subtle complexity of rest in one of history's most enduring civilizations. Now, let us drift into a quieter, more enigmatic part of our journey, the mysteries that linger in the shadows of ancient Egyptian night rituals. Imagine yourself walking slowly through corridors that have not been touched by living hands for centuries, where the faint scent of stone, incense, and time itself seems to rise from the walls. Here, history becomes less about the tangible and more about the subtle whispers left behind, evidence of beliefs, customs, and secrets that archaeology continues to reveal. In many royal tombs, the objects placed alongside the deceased hint at nightly practices even after life has ended. Archaeologists have discovered small models of beds, miniature amulets, and painted scenes depicting sleep, rest, or nightly offerings. These are not mere decorative items. They reflect an enduring concern with what might happen when the physical body lies down and the spirit wanders. Imagine, for a moment, the careful hands that created these objects, smoothing the surfaces, choosing the shapes, and arranging them to guide the deceased through the journey of the afterlife. Among these discoveries are intricate models of servants, musicians, and guards, tiny figures designed to continue the routines of palace life long after the pharaoh has passed. Each figure is positioned thoughtfully, sometimes holding miniature tools, instruments, or food. They are silent companions, reminders that the cycles of daily life, ceremonial order, and protective care were expected to continue without interruption. There's a strange, calming poetry in this thought, that even in death, the structure and rhythm of life are preserved. Archaeological evidence also hints at the unusual ways night rituals intersected with spirituality and divination. In certain tombs, for example, we find inscribed texts and protective charms specifically meant to safeguard sleep and dreams. Some were intended to prevent nightmares, others to encourage beneficial visions. Scholars suggest that the Egyptians believed dreams to be windows into both the spiritual and practical worlds. Messages from gods, guide from ancestors, or subtle hints regarding decisions the living might face. The connection between sleep, ritual, and foresight was deeply ingrained. Even the architecture of the royal sleeping quarters reflects this interplay between mystery and daily life. Windows were often latticed, allowing gentle breezes and moonlight to enter while maintaining privacy and focus. Walls and doors were adorned with protective symbols, eyes, lotus flowers, and falcons, that functioned not only as decoration, but as metaphors of vigilance. Every surface, every artifact, was carefully chosen to create a space where human rest intertwined with cosmic security. Consider, too, the role of scents and incense. Archaeologists have found traces of kifi in preserved vessels, confirming that this complex aromatic mixture was central to night rituals. The precise composition often varied, but ingredients like honey, wine, myrrh, and herbs were combined to create fragrances meant to calm, protect, and align the senses. As we imagine the pharaoh breathing in these scents, we can picture how the olfactory experience, coupled with visual cues and symbolic objects, formed a complete environment of reassurance. Mystery also lingers in the details that remain unseen. How exactly did the pharaoh perceive dreams? What thoughts crossed his mind as he lay on the raised bed? While we can never know completely, the careful documentation of rituals, artifacts, and texts offers a glimpse into a world where night was far more than mere darkness. It was an active, guarded space, rich with belief and quiet ceremony. Some of the most intriguing evidence comes from tomb paintings and inscriptions that suggest nightly journeys of the soul. In these depictions, the pharaoh's spirit moves through corridors of stars, guided by gods and protected by charms. Scenes of sleep, rest, and vigilance exist side by side with depictions of the afterlife. The symbolic repetition is gentle yet constant. Day gives way to night, life to death, consciousness to dream, and the universe remains balanced throughout. Archaeologists working in these spaces often describe a peculiar stillness, almost a sacred hush that seems to persist despite centuries of excavation. It is easy to imagine standing in a dim tomb chamber, the faint smell of dust and preserved resin in the air, as sunlight filters softly through a narrow opening. The space feels suspended, holding centuries of intention, belief, and quiet care. Here, history whispers rather than shouts, and the imagination of the listener is free to wander among objects, symbols, and traces left by those who lived long ago. As you picture these ancient spaces, consider how ordinary and extraordinary coexist. The same hands that sculpted tiny figures, inscribed protective texts, or prepared aromatic oils also shaped monuments, managed estates, and directed armies. Yet in the quiet of the night, their focus shifted entirely toward calm, ritualized rest. This duality, a life of public spectacle balanced by private, reflective, and mysterious practices, remains one of the most fascinating aspects of studying ancient Egypt. So we sit quietly in our minds within these spaces of shadow and whisper. We imagine the flicker of lamplight over painted walls, the soft gliding of attendants, the gentle alignment of charms on a raised bed, and the faint perfume of incense lingering in the air. The night carries on, timeless, patient, and enveloping. It is a world where mystery is not frightening, but soothing, where ritual, belief, and preparation for rest coexist in delicate harmony. And as we consider the objects, the texts, and the architecture left behind, we feel a gentle connection, not only to the pharaoh or the palace, but to the enduring human need for calm, protection, and continuity as night falls. The mysteries of ancient Egypt do not startle or confuse. They invite, softly, into a place of reflection and serene curiosity. Continuing our quiet exploration, let us focus on the cultural significance of night in ancient Egyptian society and how it shaped both palace and commoner practices. Imagine, once again, stepping softly through moonlit courtyards and shadowed hallways, where every object, scent, and movement reflects a carefully maintained relationship between life, rest, and the unseen world. Night was not merely a backdrop for sleep. It was an active space filled with meaning, observation, and subtle ritual. Archaeological records and ancient texts reveal that Egyptians considered night a time when the barriers between worlds were thin. The gods themselves moved through darkness, traveling along celestial paths, while spirits and ancestral presences were believed to roam the earth more freely. The pharaohs' nightly rituals, then, were not just personal. They were an essential part of maintaining cosmic order. By performing protective acts and arranging charms, the king ensured that the natural and spiritual worlds remained in balance while the kingdom slept. Within the palace, this understanding created a structured, deliberate approach to the night. Attendants, priests, and even the palace guards acted with gentle vigilance. Their tasks, arranging oils, lighting lamps, or performing soft incantations, were slow, unobtrusive, yet continuous. Everything was done with quiet precision, a kind of soft choreography that harmonized with the rhythms of the household. Each gesture, each scent, and each faint sound contributed to an invisible network of protection and continuity. Even beyond the palace walls, night held significance for ordinary Egyptians. Families prepared small offerings in their homes, lit oil lamps, and performed subtle gestures of protection for themselves and their children. The nighttime hours were a mirror of palace practices on a smaller scale, reinforcing the idea that sleep was a passage, a moment of vulnerability, and a ritualized opportunity to align with spiritual forces. The same principles applied: calm, deliberate movement, protective charms, and gentle observation of the environment. Some archaeological findings even suggest that certain rituals were specifically intended to influence dreams. Egyptians believed that dreams could carry messages or guidance from the divine. Small inscriptions and carvings show protective symbols placed near sleeping areas or gentle invocations recited before sleep, meant to guide the dreamer through safe and beneficial visions. One can imagine a soft, steady murmur of words spoken in rhythm, accompanied by the faint scent of incense and the touch of smooth linens, an environment designed to nurture both body and mind. The artistic representation of night also underscores its cultural importance. Tomb paintings, wall reliefs, and small figurines depict serene nocturnal scenes, the pharaoh resting on a raised bed, musicians playing softly, servants attending quietly, and protective symbols arranged with care. These images were more than decoration. They were records of belief, reminders of proper conduct, and visual guides for the living and the deceased alike. The repetition of these motifs across centuries suggests a continuity of practice, a steady adherence to principles that shaped both perception and behavior during the quiet hours. Scent played a subtle but essential role. Traces of kifi, combined with the aroma of fresh lotus, resin, and other herbs, created a calming environment that transcended mere comfort. The Egyptians understood that smell could influence mood, focus, and perception, an early recognition of sensory connection to mental and spiritual states. Even the faintest waft of incense became part of the nocturnal rhythm, a companion to the mind as it transitioned towards sleep. It is also fascinating to consider how observation and reflection were part of nightly practice. The pharaoh and attendants might watch the stars, noting positions and patterns, while the common people looked to the heavens for seasonal markers or spiritual reassurance. The night became a space for quiet learning, meditation, and contemplation, all performed with a gentle and deliberate pace. Despite the mystery, there is nothing hurried or frightening in these practices. Darkness is treated as a canvas for ritual, an environment for calm, and a conduit for spiritual alignment. Life's complexities are softened into subtle, repetitive gestures. Even the most powerful figures, those who ruled vast territories and shaped history, participated in this shared human experience of night: preparation, reflection, protection, and ultimately rest. In this way, the Egyptian night is a delicate balance of culture, belief, and sensory experience. The palace, tombs, and homes are connected through common understanding. Sleep is a passage, ritual is a safeguard, and calm, Deliberate action is a guide for both mind and spirit. The mysteries we glimpse are not frightening. They are patient, quiet, and enveloping. They invite the observer to imagine, to wander slowly, and to participate in a world where night is a sacred companion rather than a void. And so we linger in this gentle darkness, observing symbols, smells, sounds, and shadows. The palace and its inhabitants rest. The city sleeps. The desert and Nile maintain their silent rhythms. And we, too, move softly along, tracing the faint outlines of ritual, reflection, and mystery that have endured for millennia. As the night continues to deepen, we turn our attention to the quieter, almost imperceptible details of Egyptian nocturnal culture. Those subtleties that often escape casual observation, but reveal much about the beliefs, priorities, and rhythms of the time. Imagine yourself walking through a silent palace corridor or along a courtyard lined with gently swaying palm trees, the faint fragrance of lotus and incense lingering in the cool night air. In these moments, the line between the tangible world and the spiritual one feels remarkably thin. The objects left behind by ancient Egyptians speak volumes about their relationship with night and sleep. Small amulets, often shaped like the eye of Horus or the scarab, were placed strategically near the bed, tucked under pillows, or laid across the chest. Archaeologists have noted that many of these items were handmade, individually carved, and sometimes inscribed with subtle protective phrases. Their presence, delicate yet deliberate, was meant to safeguard not just the body, but the spirit as it moved through the darkness. A reminder that sleep was considered a temporary journey into another realm. Painted tomb walls further reinforce this understanding. Scenes depict the pharaoh resting on a raised bed, attended by servants who carry lamps, oils, or offerings. Musicians play softly, their instruments captured in frozen motion, hinting at gentle, rhythmic melodies meant to soothe the senses. Even in these artistic renderings, the emphasis is on calm, slow movement rather than dramatic activity. Each stroke, each line, communicates an environment of order, harmony, and gentle vigilance. The sensory environment of these nocturnal rituals was carefully orchestrated. Scents were central. Kifi, a blend of honey, wine, herbs, and resins, would be burned in small vessels, releasing a faint, enveloping aroma. The combination of sweetness, warmth, and earthiness was designed to comfort, focus, and calm. Even the texture of materials, the smooth linen sheets, polished wood, and soft mats, played a role in preparing the body and mind for rest. In a world without modern conveniences, these subtle cues became essential tools for mental and spiritual equilibrium. Night also provided a space for reflection and quiet observation. The pharaoh, or even ordinary Egyptians in their smaller homes, might gaze at the stars, tracing familiar patterns that marked the passing of time and seasons. The constellations were not merely decorative. They served as navigational tools, spiritual markers, and reminders of the eternal cycles. To witness the stars was to participate in an ancient dialogue, a silent communication between the mortal and the divine, between daily life and the eternal order. Archaeological findings suggest that Egyptians paid careful attention to the transition from wakefulness to sleep. Small vessels of water were sometimes kept near the bed, symbolic of cleansing and rebirth. Incense, amulets, and protective texts functioned as both ritual and reassurance. Each detail, while understated, contributed to a holistic approach. The body, mind, and spirit were prepared simultaneously for rest, aligned with cosmic rhythms and spiritual beliefs. Even the layout of sleeping quarters reflects this intentionality. Beds were raised, often positioned to align with cardinal directions or symbolic features of the room. Lamps were placed to cast steady, unobtrusive light, creating shadows that were neither frightening nor harsh. Walls and surfaces were adorned with symbols that reminded the sleeper of protection, order, and continuity. Every element, from the smallest amulet to the pattern of a woven sheet, served a purpose in this quiet orchestration. Beyond the palace, the culture of night extended into communal and familial practices. Children slept with small protective charms. Families might whisper brief prayers or set out minor offerings to ensure safety. The rhythm of night was considered a shared experience, with patterns of vigilance, protection, and ritual echoing across social strata. The same values that guided royal sleep, calm, preparation, and alignment with cosmic order, were mirrored in the homes of ordinary Egyptians, creating a continuum of cultural practice. By observing these layers of practice, we begin to see night not as empty darkness, but as a structured, meaningful space. The pharaoh, attendants, priests, and commoners alike moved through it slowly, deliberately, and with attention to detail. Darkness was neither frightening nor idle. It was a canvas for ritual, reflection, and gentle interaction with unseen forces. Every object, scent, and sound contributed to a quiet narrative, a meditation on continuity and care. As the night deepens, we are left with a sense of suspended time. The palace and its inhabitants rest, the city sleeps, and the desert beyond shimmers faintly under the star-filled sky. Here, history whispers instead of shouting, offering us a view into a world where ritual, observation, and calm merge seamlessly with the passage of night. It is a world of subtlety, patience, and care, one that invites the imagination to wander slowly, softly, and without urgency. And so, we leave this realm of mystery, archaeology, and nocturnal culture with a gentle awareness. Even in the shadows, even in silence, the rhythms of life, protection, and belief continue to weave their quiet pattern, enveloping both past and present in a calm, enduring order. As we move into the final segment of our journey, let us observe the interplay between social classes in ancient Egypt during the nighttime hours. While we have spent much time within the calm of the royal palace, it is equally illuminating to consider how ordinary citizens and the elite experienced night differently, yet shared certain underlying rhythms. Imagine yourself walking slowly through a bustling yet muted city, where the transition from daylight activity to evening quiet is subtle, measured, and intentional. In the homes of wealthy merchants, scribes, and minor officials, the evening brought a series of gentle routines, not unlike those of the pharaoh, though scaled to simpler means. The rooms were often smaller, yet carefully arranged. Mats or low beds were layered with linen sheets, while small lamps provided a steady glow, their flicker casting gentle, moving shadows across walls adorned with painted motifs or simple carvings. Objects of protection, a small amulet here, a symbolic figure there, were common, echoing the royal attention to spiritual safety, though in a more modest form. Families prepared light meals as the sun sank behind the horizon. The smell of freshly baked bread or boiled lentils mixed with the cooler evening air. Conversation slowed. Children were guided gently toward their beds, sometimes holding a charm, sometimes listening to soft words of instruction or encouragement from parents. Even within these homes, night was considered a period of both rest and subtle ritual, a time when the mundane and spiritual intertwined seamlessly. Artisans who spent the day crafting tools, statues, or textiles would often conclude their evening with quieter work, smoothing clay, preparing pigments, or checking the alignment of a loom before settling down. These acts, though practical, carried an inherent rhythm, a slow repetition that mirrored the ceremonial calm observed in royal quarters. The pace of life, though physically demanding during the day, softened at night, emphasizing deliberate action and reflection. Contrast this with the experience of peasants and laborers who lived closer to the Nile or in rural villages. Their evenings were simpler and more utilitarian. After tending fields, animals, or small tasks in the household, they would gather for communal meals. Conversations would be muted, laughter soft, and movements gentle, all in harmony with fading light. Lamps, when used, were small, providing just enough illumination to complete essential tasks or to maintain vigilance. Sleep followed closely on these small routines, emphasizing rest after physical exertion rather than ceremonial observance. Despite the differences in wealth and status, there were notable similarities. All Egyptians, royal, elite, or commoner, followed a consistent pattern of wind down, reflection, and protection. Night was universally understood as a period when vigilance and ritual mattered, when the unseen world might influence dreams, and when the transition from waking to sleeping required care. It was a space in which daily concerns softened, sensory cues guided calmness, and gentle rhythms governed both body and mind. The contrast between palace life and common life is also evident in scale and luxury. In the palace, attendants adjusted oil lamps, arranged protective amulets, and maintained ceremonial order around the pharaoh. In a merchant's house, a single lamp might provide enough light for a child to finish a small task, or for a family to prepare a simple meal. In a village, the night was quiet, punctuated by natural sounds, the movement of water in the Nile, the rustle of reeds, or the distant call of an animal. Yet across all settings, there was a shared understanding. Calm, deliberate action supported rest, protection, and continuity. Social hierarchy also influenced who performed nighttime rituals. In royal households, specialized priests and attendants carried out specific tasks, blending spiritual and practical functions. Among the elite, family members often assumed these roles, reciting protective words or arranging small charms. Among commoners, simpler gestures, touching an amulet, laying out a mat carefully, or whispering a prayer, fulfilled similar purposes, emphasizing intention over ceremony. In every case, night became an active, conscious space, not just an absence of light. Even the sensory environment differed. Palaces were filled with curated scents, kifi, myrrh, and incense designed to soothe and protect. Elite homes might contain similar aromas in smaller quantities. Rural homes relied more on the natural fragrance of herbs, bread baking, or nearby fields, offering a quieter, earthier form of sensory comfort. Each environment, however, contributed to the subtle orchestration of calm and readiness for sleep. In reflecting on these contrasts, one can see that ancient Egyptian society approached night with a consistent philosophy. It was a time of intentional stillness, gentle protection, and reflective preparation. The elite and commoner alike understood the importance of order, routine, and subtle ritual. While the richness of surroundings and complexity of rituals varied, the underlying principles were shared, creating a harmonious cultural rhythm that linked palace and village alike. And so, as we move quietly through these spaces, observing both grandeur and simplicity, we recognize a timeless pattern. Nightfall is a universal equalizer, inviting every human being, regardless of status, into a shared experience of calm, reflection, and preparation for rest. In this gentle rhythm, the divisions of society soften, leaving only the quiet, restorative essence of human life at night. As night deepens across the varied landscapes of ancient Egypt, we turn our attention to the routines, rituals, and small comforts that shaped evening life for the elite, highlighting both their practical and symbolic dimensions. Imagine yourself stepping softly into a wealthy household just as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in gentle shades of amber and violet. The household is quieter now, the bustle of the day replaced by a slower, more deliberate pace. In these homes, evening routines often began with small preparations for rest. Mats or low wooden beds were carefully arranged, linen sheets smoothed, and cushions or small pillows placed thoughtfully. The textures and scent of the room were important. Lightly perfumed oils or small amounts of incense were sometimes burned to create an atmosphere of calm. Every movement was measured. Folding cloth, arranging objects, lighting a lamp, an echo of the deliberate gestures performed in the palace, though simplified for practical use. Food, too, followed a measured rhythm. Light meals were often consumed after days' labor, sometimes featuring bread, fruits, lentils, or small portions of fish. The act of eating was quiet, intentional, and punctuated with gentle conversation. In wealthier homes, this time was also used to discuss household affairs or to recount small tales of family and community life. Even in discussion, the pace was slow, ensuring that energy dissipated naturally toward relaxation rather than stimulation. Protective rituals were modest but significant. Small amulets, often carved in stone or molded from clay, were positioned near sleeping areas. These symbols, whether scarabs, eyes of Horus, or miniature representations of gods, were believed to guard sleep, protect dreams, and maintain harmony within a household. Family members sometimes whispered brief, protective words, invoking familiar deities or ancestors in soft, rhythmic speech. Each gesture was gentle, repetitive, and intentionally soothing, emphasizing the quiet, restorative nature of night. The use of light was carefully considered. Lamps were not bright enough to disrupt sleep, but sufficient to allow movement and observation. Shadows stretched slowly along walls, providing a soft interplay of light and darkness. In these gentle contrasts, the household learned patience and mindfulness, understanding that night was both a natural necessity and a spiritual passage. The balance of illumination and shadow mirrored the balance sought in daily life and nightly ritual. Elite children were gradually guided into their own routines. Their beds were prepared with small mats or linen sheets, and simple charms were placed nearby. Parents might recount familiar stories or gently hum soft melodies to ease the transition from activity to rest. Even small acts, touching an amulet, adjusting a blanket, or smoothing hair, became gestures of care intended to comfort and protect. These practices, though understated, contributed to a continuity of attention and nurturing across generations. Outside the homes, the city and surrounding countryside settled into quiet rhythms. Markets were emptied, temples grew still, and the Nile's gentle flow provided a natural, meditative backdrop. In villages, the evening was marked by the same basic principles of routine, protection, and calm. Tending small fires, preparing bedding, and whispering prayers to maintain safety and harmony. Though simpler, these actions mirrored the philosophy of more affluent households and the palace itself, revealing a shared cultural understanding of night. The rhythm of night also shaped reflection. In wealthy homes, the evening often included a brief period of contemplation, reviewing the day's events, noting concerns for the household, or observing the stars from small courtyards or windows. The same attention to rhythm and alignment, so evident in palace rituals, is present here on a quieter, more personal scale. Thoughts are soft, deliberate, and measured, allowing the mind to drift naturally toward rest rather than remaining occupied with unresolved tasks. By observing these quieter moments, we see that the night served multiple functions: a time for physical rest, a space for spiritual protection, and an opportunity for gentle reflection. In elite homes, these functions were executed with care, ritual, and attention to sensory detail. Light, scent, texture, and sound were all integrated into a holistic approach, creating environments that supported calm, contemplative sleep. And so, across social strata, a pattern emerges. Night is universally recognized as a period requiring care, protection, and gentle rhythm. Whether in the palace, an affluent household, or a small village dwelling, Egyptians moved through the evening deliberately, attending to both body and spirit. The contrasts in wealth and scale are clear, but the underlying philosophy of night, a commitment to calm, deliberate preparation, and protective ritual, unites them all. Nightfall, therefore, is both a divider and a unifier. It distinguishes social spaces through scale, objects, and ceremony, yet it unites all Egyptians through shared practices and beliefs. The calm gestures, protective charms, faint fragrances, and subtle light form a continuous thread, weaving palace and home into a cohesive cultural understanding of rest, reflection, and nighttime care. As the night progresses toward its deepest hours, we now reflect on the culmination of these contrasting experiences of daily life. the interplay of status, ritual, and environment as the final moments before sleep unfold. Imagine yourself walking slowly through the quiet streets of a city that stretches along the Nile, where lamplight flickers softly in windows, casting gentle reflections across the stone-paved roads. The palace, the wealthy homes, and the simpler dwellings all exist within a shared rhythm, each space tuned to the same universal cadence of night. In the palace, the pharaoh rests surrounded by layers of ceremonial care, protective charms, and attendants moving almost invisibly in the shadows. Every object, scent, and gesture serves a dual purpose: practical comfort and spiritual alignment. The calm of the chamber is deliberate and structured, designed to preserve both physical rest and cosmic balance. The pharaoh's nightly rituals, from the careful positioning of amulets to the soft recitation of protective texts, exemplify a mindful engagement with the unseen world, a constant attention to security, continuity, and the gentle transition into sleep. In the homes of the elite, the evening unfolds with a subtler, scaled-down reflection of palace life. Beds are arranged with care, lamps provide a soft, stable glow, and small charms are positioned for protection. Family members guide one another toward rest, blending the practical with the spiritual. Conversations have slowed. The household moves deliberately, each step soft, measured, and intentional. Even the smallest acts, folding a sheet, smoothing a cushion, or inhaling the faint scent of incense, become ritualized gestures of care, marking the transition from wakefulness to rest. The experience in rural villages offers a contrast that is no less rich. Families wind down together, with simpler objects and fewer formalized rituals, yet the same principles of calm, preparation, and protective attention are evident. Mats or beds are arranged thoughtfully. The faint glow of a lamp or fire provides gentle illumination, and small charms or prayers offer reassurance. The soundscape is dominated by natural rhythms: the whisper of the Nile, the rustle of palm fronds, the distant calls of nocturnal animals. These elements combine into a quiet orchestration, a deliberate slowing of life's pace that encourages rest and reflection. Across all these settings, there's a remarkable interplay between the physical and the symbolic. Linen sheets, pillows, small vessels of water or oil, amulets, and incense all serve as both practical items and spiritual tools. They remind the sleeper of the balance and protection woven into every facet of Egyptian life. Even the simplest actions, adjusting a sheet, positioning an amulet, inhaling the soft fragrance of herbs, become a bridge between the tangible and the unseen, a subtle gesture aligning body, mind, and spirit with the night. Social status shapes the richness of these practices, but it does not alter their underlying philosophy. The palace may contain the largest lamps, the most skilled attendants, and the most elaborate charms, yet the principles guiding rest, deliberate rhythm, gentle attention, and protective ritual are mirrored in smaller, humbler households. Nightfall, in this sense, is both a divider and a unifier, distinguishing spaces through scale and luxury, while linking them through shared cultural understanding. Observation of the night sky remains a quiet thread connecting all Egyptians. The stars, the moon, and the subtle phases of the night are markers of time, guides for agricultural and spiritual planning, and sources of reflection. In palaces and villages alike, people would pause to note these celestial rhythms, linking human experience with the broader cycles of the cosmos. Even as the world sleeps, this connection persists, a gentle reminder of continuity and order that extends beyond individual lives. As the hours deepen, the quiet interplay of light, scent, sound, and movement reaches its final cadence. Lamps burn lower, shadows lengthen and merge, and a faint scent of incense or herbs lingers in the air. In every home, whether palace, elite residence, or village dwelling, the rhythm of the evening slows toward silence. Sleep, now imminent, becomes both a physical necessity and a spiritual journey. The night, once active with preparation, ritual, and reflection, settles into a profound stillness. In this shared, contrasting, yet harmonized experience, we see the essence of ancient Egyptian nightlife, a deliberate slowing of time, a careful orchestration of comfort, protection, and spiritual alignment, and a universal recognition of night as both a physical and symbolic space. The grandeur of palace ritual and the modest practices of ordinary households exist on a continuum, demonstrating the cultural importance of calm, attentive preparation for rest. And so, as the city, the Nile, and the desert beyond all drift into deeper quiet, we leave the nocturnal world of ancient Egypt settled and serene. The rhythms of daily life, ritual, and cosmic observation, whether in the palace or a small village home, converge into a universal pattern of calm and continuity. Night, in all its variations and contrasts, has been experienced fully, gentle, deliberate, and restorative. As our journey through the nocturnal world of ancient Egypt draws to a gentle close, we can allow ourselves to linger for a moment in the quiet that connects past and present. Imagine the stillness, the palace lamps dimmed, the Nile's gentle flow murmuring softly, distant desert sands absorbing the cool night air. Across the social spectrum, from the pharaoh in his ceremonial chamber to the children resting on simple mats in village homes, the night has been a time of preparation, protection, and reflection. Each small gesture, each carefully arranged object, each whisper of scent and light has contributed to a rhythm designed to soothe body, mind, and spirit. In the vast tapestry of Egyptian life, night was not simply an interval of darkness, but a carefully considered space. It was the time when rituals, small or grand, shaped the passage from consciousness to sleep. Protective amulets, soft linen sheets, the faint glow of oil lamps, the subtle fragrance of incense. All these elements formed an environment of calm and continuity. Even in the humblest homes, the principles remained the same: deliberate action, gentle reflection, and the shared understanding that night demanded care and attention. As we reflect on these rhythms, we might consider how they mirror our own need for rest and calm. The Egyptians, in their meticulous attention to nightly routines, understood that sleep is not merely a biological function, but a moment to align with a natural and spiritual order. The layering of ritual, sensory detail, and quiet observation provided structure, reassurance, and comfort, a lesson that resonates even today. Perhaps, as you listen, you can allow yourself to carry some of this calm into your own evening. Picture the gentle flow of the Nile, the flickering shadows of oil lamps, the soft scent of herbs lingering in the air. Envision the careful placement of objects meant to protect and soothe. Let these images, subtle and enduring, guide your mind into a slow, measured rhythm, echoing the deliberate and serene pace of ancient Egyptian nights. And in this quiet space, we are reminded that history is not always found in battles, monuments, or grand events alone. It exists in daily life, in the small gestures that repeat night after night, in the rituals that connect humans to one another and to the cosmos. It is in the simplicity of preparation for rest, in the calm observation of stars, and in the care extended to oneself and others as darkness falls. So, as the night deepens and your own surroundings grow still, take comfort in this shared human experience. The pharaoh rests, the city sleeps, and even the desert winds move gently through the sands. And here, in this quiet reflection, you too may find your own rhythm of calm, a gentle descent into rest, and the soothing embrace of night. Thank you for joining the Sleepy Historian on this journey through the nocturnal world of ancient Egypt. If this style of soft storytelling and calm historical reflection helps you relax, feel free to like the video and subscribe. Only if it brings you peace, and share in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. There's a quiet magic in knowing that across the world and through time, others are falling asleep to the same slow, gentle stories. Now, dim your lights, let the Nile whisper, let the amulets guard, and let the rhythms of history carry you softly into sleep.